So imagine this. You wake up one morning, you open your laptop, check your email, and the very first message you see is from the Prime Minister of your country. No, really. That's exactly what happened to political analyst Abhay Dubey, and it sparked this fascinating constitutional thought experiment, turning a simple email into a really powerful critique of leadership. Let's break down how it all went down. So there it was, the subject line. Letter from the Prime Minister on Constitution Day. And right below it, an image of the PM bowing before the Constitution. It was this unexpected, direct message that ended up setting the stage for a much, much bigger conversation about what it really means to honor the nation's most important document.
So what was actually in this email? It was almost 1,000 words long, a pretty detailed reflection on the importance of the Indian Constitution, and it was sent out to citizens just like Mr. Dubey.
Well, in the letter, the Prime Minister called the Constitution a sacred document, one that allowed someone from a humble background, like himself, to lead the country. He talked about these big, symbolic acts of respect, like organizing a procession where the Constitution was carried on an elephant's back. But then, the letter pivots. It brings up Article 51A and calls on all citizens to remember their fundamental duties. And, while it name-dropped key figures like Dr. Ambedkar and Sardar Patel, the source author points out a pretty consistent omission: Jawaharlal Nehru.
Okay, so the main point, the real takeaway from the Prime Minister's message, was an appeal directly to the people of India.
The message couldn't have been clearer. It is every citizen's job to be dutiful. And here's the thing, the source author, Abhay Dubey, he's totally on board with this. He says he's more than ready to follow the PM's lead. And this exact point of agreement is where our story takes a very, very interesting turn. Because agreeing with the PM got him thinking. And it led him to ask a really powerful follow-up question, shifting the focus from us, the citizens, to the person in charge. And there it is. That's the pivotal question. If every single citizen has a duty to the Constitution, well then, what are the specific constitutional duties of the person holding the highest office in the land? This one question is the foundation for the author's entire response.
And this gets us right to the heart of the author's argument. Real respect for the Constitution isn't just about bowing or parades. It's about actually doing the job that the Constitution created. Leadership, he's basically saying, has to be by example. And to help with that, he decided to create a little checklist.
So, inspired by the Prime Minister's own letter, the source author put together what he calls a constitutional checklist for the PM. Let's dig into the first 5 points.
These first 5 duties, they're really about building a kind of constitutional firewall to protect the government's integrity. The list kicks off with preventing any interference from outside non-constitutional bodies. Then it moves to taking firm action against violent groups and keeping the government independent from corporate money. It's all about making sure the state is running freely and fairly for every single person.
Now, to really get that second point, it's important to understand how the source defines non-state actors. It's not just a vague term. The author specifically calls out groups like the Bajrang Dal or the VHP and people involved in mob lynchings or attacks on places of worship. He argues that their actions are outside the law and that it's the PM's duty to make sure the law applies to them too.
To make his point about corporate influence, the author highlights a specific case. Citing a report from Scroll, he notes that the Tata Group got a massive government subsidy for a project. Then, just 4 weeks later, that same group reportedly became the BJP's single largest donor. The author simply puts the question out there. Is this a coincidence, or is it an example of what he calls subsidy in exchange for donations?
And to illustrate the fourth duty, equal treatment for all companies, the source brings up what it calls the double A distortion for Ambani and Adani. It points to the Adani Group's market value, which skyrocketed from $6.5 billion in 2014 to $223 billion. The source claims that 13 of the group's biggest international deals are directly connected to the Prime Minister's foreign trips, which raises serious questions about a level playing field.
For the fifth duty, ensuring internal security, the source cites government data in the South Asia Terrorism Portal. It lays out a pretty stark number. Between 2014 and 2023, there were over 629 recorded terrorist incidents, leading to hundreds of deaths. The author argues that constitutional duty demands accountability for these kinds of security lapses.
All right, so the author's checklist then shifts gears and moves from security and governance and dives right into the nuts and bolts of democracy itself. Let's get into the final 5 duties. These last 5 duties are all about the health of the democratic process. The author is calling for protecting voter secrecy, making sure the Election Commission, not individual voters, is responsible for accurate voter lists, and creating a truly level playing field. On that last point, he specifically targets the booth-level agent role, arguing that having party operatives right there at polling stations can give the ruling party a huge, unfair advantage. The list rounds out by stressing the need to respect the opposition and empower people with jobs, not just handouts.
Now, I want to pause on that EVM point for a second, because the author's argument is really specific. It's not about hacking, not at all. Instead, he claims that because EVMs let parties see the voting results for each individual booth, they can figure out exactly how specific neighborhoods voted. This, he argues, completely undermines the whole principle of a secret ballot, which is a voter's fundamental right.
And that 9th duty, about respecting the opposition? Man, this quote from the source just sums it up perfectly. The author's point is that a majority in a democracy gives you the right to govern, sure, but it's not a license to just grab all the power and shut down anyone who disagrees with you. Respecting the opposition, he argues, is a constitutional must. So after laying out this whole 10-point checklist, the author brings his argument full circle. He contrasts 2 very different ways of looking at what it means to respect the Constitution.
And this slide just lays it all out, doesn't it? It's the core of the whole argument. On one side, you've got the symbolic acts that the Prime Minister mentioned in his letter. And on the other, you have the actual tangible duties that the author says really matter, things that directly affect how the country runs and how people live.
So what's the bottom line here? According to the source, it's pretty simple. Ceremonies and symbols are one thing, but action is everything. For a leader, the highest form of respect for the Constitution is just doing the job it lays out for you.
And that really leaves us with a question that goes way beyond this one letter. For any leader in any democracy, what's the right balance? How much weight do you give to the symbolic gestures of respect versus the hard daily grind of actually upholding your constitutional duties? It's definitely something to think about.